everybody, and welcome to Sonic Talk 420. That's right, it's episode 420. Whenever it's a round number, I think it has some kind of special value, but actually it's just 420. So we're still some way off the big magic 500, though I'm thoroughly looking forward to getting there sometime next year. We're not there yet. So what am I looking for? I am looking for, but I'm sorry, I'm a bit spaced out. I was very late last night, and I'm not quite with it. Unlike my guests, who I'm sure are very with it. But before we get on to them, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, obviously iZotope. iZotope will be giving away a copy of Brake Tweaker from last week's competition. We'll be announcing the winner. And also next week's competition will be set too, where you can also win Brake Tweaker. So do stay tuned for that. It'll be somewhere around halfway through. And remember, if this is the first time you've seen us, or you've seen us more than once, and you're thinking, you know what, I need a reminder to let me know when Sonic State uploads more great content to YouTube, because we have got a lot of stuff coming. We've got Gaz's Launchpad Pro review. We've got the Modor NF1 synth. We've got something special I filmed yesterday because I was up late in London with for a product release. So all of those things, if you want to find out, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's very simple and straightforward. I mean, what more can I say? So I want to say thank you very much to our chat room, who are fulsome as ever. I have to plug my camera in. There you are. Thank you very much for joining us. And also, we'll start saying hello to our guests, shall we? We'll start over here with Mr. Mark Tinley. Mr. Mark, I suppose I should say, I was going to say Mrs. Mark Tinley, but actually that's not really. But your status hasn't changed in terms of title. But Mark, of course, has been married since the last time we spoke.
In this bright light.
I'm not sure what's going on there.
I have been married.
You're now, your hand is in front of your face. Oh, right, that's your ring. Sorry, I was just thinking, what on earth's he doing? Now I understand.
I'm showing off my new wedding ring.
Lovely. So did you have a lovely day?
Very good, actually. Yeah, we got married in a pagan temple in Glastonbury. And we had a very nice man called Julian that make our rings for us, which is why I'm very pleased about it. And we got some old meaningful gold rings, like Gina's mum's wedding ring, and then we cut it up and melted it, and it's all very DIY.
Oh, that's lovely. So have you been on honeymoon?
I don't know if that would come out.
Been anywhere nice on your honeymoon? I see that. Yeah, your video and audio seems to have suddenly just degraded massively. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's your new marital status. It's the wife. She's playing some online gambling where she has to download huge amounts of video, no doubt. Anyway, Mark,
what did you ask me before?
Did you go anywhere nice on your honeymoon? I think is what I was.
Yeah, Glastonbury. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
We haven't been on a honeymoon yet. The wedding was so unbelievably expensive. We've got to save up for the honeymoon now. I
can understand that. While I've got you, actually, I just want to say congratulations to our guitars editor, Rich Beach, who also got married last weekend. And I'm just about over the hangover now, but Mr. and Mrs. Beach, congratulations. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's get straight on to our next guest, who is Mr. Ty Unwin, fresh from his composing job. It was a bit hit or miss. I'm guessing you've got some sort of massive deadline that you've got to that you've now irresponsibly substituted us for, which is we're very, very appreciative. But I hope it's not going to get you in trouble.
As long as they won't. As long as they don't watch this, it's absolutely fine.
Oh dear. Well, I can't. It's fairly likely they're not, but you never know. Our reach is further than we think. In fact, I think last time we had Dave Robinson on, was it last week or the week before? And he came on because he bumped into Daniel Miller, the head of Mute Records, grandfather of British electronic music signings, and he said he listens still. So if you're out there, Daniel, nice to have you listening. I'm sorry, that sentence didn't actually end up quite as confidently as I started it. So Ty, you're there.
Yes.
Have you been throwing all-nighters and all of those things that one has to do in these circumstances?
Yes. Lots of all-nighters.
Wow.
And I've not been that well either, so which doesn't help matters.
How does your creative process happen in the wee hours? Do you find that you get the creative stuff done and then that the all-nighter comes with the sort of the more IT and sort of physical aspects that you have to, like getting the hit points and all of that? How do you try and spread it out when you're doing that, when you know you've got to do that sort of thing?
No, I kind of have two heads really. I mean, I've said this quite a few times before. I kind of have a kind of more autopilot head and a very creative head. And I just kind of, in the early hours, I sit to be fair, I seem to work quite well in the early hours, mainly because I think there's a kind of self-imposed pressure in the early hours, because it normally means I'm working through to deliver things first thing in the morning, and also the fact that the phone isn't going, the emails aren't going, so it's
yeah, there's a sort of clandestine aspect to it where and also you think, this is my last chance. If I don't do it tonight, then there really was no point in staying. All of those bridges I've burnt with my family in the other half, and the things I've missed.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I've been in that situation once or twice before. I understand totally. Anyway, let's take things maybe into the realms of location. This is a rather interesting video.
My name is MP4 De Berg, and I'm the producer of Gothenburg Symphony Orchestra's filmed concerts at GSO Play.
This is actually to do with the SHA MV
China tour in April
88, which is an iOS device recording, and there are some great examples later on.
Since I use Apple
I can't
iOS
see
devices for filming and editing, I was looking for an Apple sound recording solution as well, and was lucky to get a prototype of the...
Here we go. This is quite interesting. So this is the Decca sound rig, this is the SHA. I was quite impressed. The SHA mic is basically... let's see here. It is a mid-side little capsule you stick on the top of your iOS device, and it's got the A to D built into it, I believe. And you can sort out the mid-side recording is quite interesting. I mean, I've always been very impressed with the stereo imaging of mid-side. Never fully understood it though. So this thing seems to make it a lot easier. You can let me see. There's the capsule. And then it comes with a device that there we go. So it allows you to kind of set the width, and you've got simple EQ and some other compression and stuff. I don't know, Ty, do you find that you ever have to deal with location stuff as part of a soundtrack, or is it mostly electronic sources you're dealing with?
Location stuff. I mean, if I have to do location stuff, it's normally in a concert hall or something like that, in which case I'll take a full rig of preamps and a mixer and a whole load of mics. I mean, if I'm going to use something like this, I used to use things like this a long time ago. I used to be really into doing field recordings, and when I was really into sampling, and I used to go around, I used to do what everyone used to do and just sample everything. And so at the time I used to have one of those, was it TCD D3 little DAT machines, little Sony DAT machines. I can't believe I'm using DAT as a terminology now, but so I used to go with DAT machines, and now I've got an R09 and I've got an R26, the Roland. So I mean, which are nice, which are good, but I mean, it's more just, I don't use them that often. I mean, this looks great. I mean, I've used my iPhone a few times to do things, and every time I think it'd be quite nice to actually have a decent sounding mic on here. And all the ones that I've seen before, they just don't seem to. I don't know. They're just not that impressive. This one actually looks the business, really. I think the problem I have with all of them is the actual connector bit, because I always think that just looks, the fact it's just being held on by the Thunderbolt connection. I always think that just looks a bit dodgy.
Exhibit A, my lad. Yes, there it is. Direct connection.
You know what I mean? There looks quite a lot of substance going on, just being held on by that one.
Well, I suppose
I'm sure they've sorted it.
Yeah, I suppose it's got that kind of thing that will rest on top of your device. Now, I know I'm going to come to you, Mark, because I know you are a massive fan of binaural recording and field recording. I'm not sure what you're using. I mean, have you got anything to go? I mean, obviously, it's tempting to use an iOS device, or, well, this raises another question perhaps we'll come on to later, but do you find that you're recording, what are you recording into these days, sir?
Well, I've got this thing, actually. This is a Tascam thing, but this has got the added flaw that just after I bought it, they changed from the 30-pin connector to
so now you need an extender
new
cable.
Connector, yeah. But the amount of those little connectors that my son has broken off in his iPad, I don't know that I would trust that thing. I've got an old Marantz PCM recorder. If I dig in this drawer, I might find it. Hang on a minute. Which is quite good.
Oh yeah,
and I like it because it's where is my microphone? I like this because it's very solid, and it hangs around my neck, and it makes me look like the guy from the Sony advert in the 1970s. And
it makes you look like you know what you're doing. Whereas if you turn up with a phone with a little
yeah.
tiny thing on it, perhaps you don't. Yeah.
I mean, well, it's a professional recorder, but it looks professional. And then I use this microphone, which is
Bayer,
forgotten what it is. Bayer Dynamic 58, I think.
That's your classic reporter stick mic, actually. Very good rejection.
Yes, exactly.
Hypercardioid. Yeah.
And I've got some binaural ones as well, which I've been doing away with preamps and trying to get it as clean as possible. But the binaural mics I've got are OKM. They're quite noisy, I suppose.
Right.
And I can reduce the noise by doing noise reduction afterwards. But I've kind of got this whole, I mean, maybe it's because I've gone deaf in the top end. I now sort of think that dynamic mics are really cool. And I know they don't have much above maybe like 14, 15 kilohertz. But what the advantage of a dynamic mic is it's whisper quiet. There's no self noise other than the self noise of the electronics that you plug it into.
That's a good point.
So
yeah.
I bought that Juiced Link preamp, which is really good, it's super quiet. And then I'm kind of feeding that into line input. I don't trust anything on the iPhone anymore. Sorry.
Well, that's fair, that's a fair point. I mean, I think I can. Concur, but I mean, it seems like, I guess, this guy obviously would be using his Deca-Tree to record that stuff anyway, and just be able to have comparisons and to be able to, because it obviously comes with an app and all those things. But it did rather bring up the question is, there's nothing like this for the Android device. I mean, we don't all use iPhones. In fact, I haven't got an iPhone. I've got a S5, and I would like to have a decent mic in there. But the only thing that seems to be available is this IK Multimedia thing, which is the iRig Cast or the iRig Mic, but they're just mono, so you can't do the mono. You can't do stereo stuff, and there doesn't seem to be any real information about driving USB audio devices from an Android. And as soon as you get into that, it's like the USB audio device is probably about as expensive as a portable recorder. So you're kind of, you're getting into that world.
I mean, if this takes you into a world where you've got a better quality recording device in your hand for what's $149, it's about 100 UK pounds.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You'd be hard pushed to buy a half decent recording device for £149, and if you've already got your phone from your mobile phone provider, maybe this is a good idea.
Well, the Zoom H4n isn't that much more expensive, and that's not bad. I mean, it's not current generation recorders, but it's not a bad thing. And I know certainly if you're doing lines, it's okay.
The thing I'll say about all of these small recorders is the microphone preamps are generally not very good. So no matter how good your microphone is, if you plug it into something like a Zoom, even the H4 or the H5, the microphone preamps are so noisy. They're just horrible. So you'd be better off spending your money on a good microphone and a good preamp, and a less expensive recorder, if you ask me. So if this microphone can get round the preamp, if the preamp in it's quiet and you're going directly into the phone and the phone is like just taking it digitally, maybe that's good.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I suppose the preamp and the mic are matched in this case. So in many ways, you're going to get probably the best noise you can get, given the fact that it's teeny tiny, and probably the power it draws is not going to be. Well, it's not going to be super hot because obviously it's going to be draining the battery. I think you can pull power out of that. You must be able to if it's got a condenser mic in it, I suppose.
There's a lot of new tiny little surface mount technology microphones coming out, which are supposed to be really good and can sound like their larger counterparts. So maybe it's not using that much power. But I still reckon it will get snapped off at some point.
Yeah, you're probably right. I think the one thing worth mentioning, people are always saying, but what if you haven't got an iPhone? I mean, you can always do this with an iPod Touch, that kind of thing, can't you? So, those yes. You can plug those sort of things in as well. But anyway, I suppose
I think there's something. I just think there's something about the whole iPhone and iPad thing that I don't know. For me,
sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Yeah, sorry about that. That's where he was supposed to be.
There's something about it which, I don't know. Every time I have something to add on to my iPad or iPhone or whatever, there's something which automatically just makes me almost feel like it's not real. It's not the real deal. There's something which feels a bit bodged. Does that make sense?
A bit light.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does make sense.
a bit.
I remember
Yeah.
years ago when I couldn't afford a Fairlight, somebody who had a Fairlight 3 said to me, well, Fairlight 3 is brilliant, but it has its own sonic fingerprint. So everything you put in there ends up sounding the same. So if you do everything in the Fairlight, then your music's going to end up tailored to this sonic fingerprint, and it all gets to sound a bit sterile. And I thought, no, that can't possibly be right. But I think if people are building synthesizers using the same building blocks in iOS, so that you're given filters and you're given oscillators and you're given waveforms and all this stuff. So I keep downloading these iOS synths, and I look at it on my phone and I think, oh, good, I've got an AKS synth here. And then I think, well, that sounds remarkably like the last thing I downloaded. And I think I've become wise to that sonic fingerprint in the iOS. And now they all sound samey, and now it's all beginning to sound a bit boring. When it first came out, it was like, wow, this is amazing, I can do this. But now it's like, oh God, not another synth that sounds exactly like all the other ones that's pretending to be something that it's not. I want it has to like sound different for it to be for it to now have the same level of excitement as when they first came out. And they don't. And it's a bit the same with VSTs and AUs and everything else. It's like,
well, I don't know. I think they might be getting some. Ty, you look like you
surely, yeah. Well, it's just, but surely, iOS is just another computer platform. It's another coding. It's another platform. So in terms of the,
it is, but they give you the building block, so it's
well,
almost
not necessarily.
like they've given you
only to certain degrees. I mean, you can build your own stuff from scratch. I mean, you don't have to use those, and that's what a lot of developers are doing as well.
I don't think for me it's the sound. It's the sound. I don't personally. I don't think that there's such a thing as the sound of an iOS device. But I think it's more the. I think it's more the interface, and the more that you've got something which is physically so, kind of perfect, and then you're kind of sticking bits on and adding things to it, and it's hanging off here and adapters here, and by the time I'm doing all of that, I just think, oh, do you know what? I mean, I've got all the synths for the iOS stuff. I mean, Robbie and I talk about this quite often. We've got all the synths. We've got everything. But when was the last time we actually used one other than being stuck on a train somewhere and we've got to kill 10 minutes? I can't remember. And I think there's some good stuff out there, but there's just something, I don't know. I mean, at the same time, I'm saying all that. I have, I'm a Mac boy, so I've got multiple iPads and I've got iPhones, and everything is Mac in this house. Everything is Apple. Right. But there's still just something which is, I don't know. The moment you have to put something onto an iPad or an iPhone or an whatever, it just doesn't quite do it for me.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. I think perhaps we should move on a bit. I'll do our sponsor slot now, because then it's out of the way and we can crack on with our other stuff as well. So let me just find my copy. So this is, of course, Break Tweaker, designed and developed by iZotope. Break Tweaker is not just a drum machine, it's a drum sculpting and beat sequencing environment that blurs the line between rhythm and melody. You can give your beats really quite evolving depth that gets better the longer they play, with these kind of really interesting polyrhythmic timing cycles. You could use slicing to drive everything from pitch melodic lines to sweeping rhythmic overtures, and you can top it off with a comprehensive drum sample library, which is curated by BT, iZotope and other top producers, and you can explore a new era of rhythmic possibilities with this forward-thinking and forward-sounding instrument. In fact, today is the very last day on sale through September the 20th. It's $100 off. Usually it's $249 and it's now $149, so today's your last day to get it. But there's also a competition as well, though. Don't let that stop you. Of course, you can always download the demo, iZotope.com/breaktweaker. Last week we asked you to enter the competition by sending out the hashtag Rhythm Synthesis and Break Tweaker, and we have a winner. His name is, now I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pronounce this, is Hulkbo Smash. His Twitter handle is @Hulkbo with a K, BOW_Smash. And he said, most interesting about the Sensei Morph was Sensel Morph was painting with brushes, next Synth EQ feature. So that was in relation to one of the topics we talked about last week about the new touch surface. But anyway, congratulations, Mr. Hulkbo or Mr. Smash. I'm not quite sure which way around it goes. If you get in touch, then the Isotope Fairy will be able to pass on your prize in the usual email fashion. So do get in touch and let us know. And of course, this week we've got another competition. Thanks again to the generous people at Isotope. To enter this week, you need to tweet the hashtag SynthBeats. See what I did there? Beats and synth, because it's got synthesis as well. And the hashtag BreakTweaker. To at Sonic State and at Isotope Inc. So for those of you perhaps not listening, watching the video, hashtag SynthBeats and the hashtag BreakTweaker to at Sonic State and at Isotope Inc. And that will automatically enter you to the competition, and we can pick it next week. So thanks very much to our sponsors for sponsoring the show. And now we're going to move on with our next bit of information. Now, this actually got me thinking about a lot of things. This is a video from Native Instruments. It's Maroon 5, who are, pretty much arch poppers. Surprisingly, I thought they were kind of a boy band, but these do seem like kind of general sentient, self-producing songwriting beings that just happen to fit in.
For so long,
and they're talking about their use of machine in the workflow, how obviously they used to just sit in a rehearsal room, and this has kind of enabled them to free them up. This is Jamie, who's a songwriter and guitarist.
Better part of a decade. But we became a little restless with that process. I'm an instrumentalist. I play guitar. I like to play things, not stare at screens. I ended up gravitating towards the machine just because it's all right there in front of me.
This is a very heavily promo, but this is the interesting bit.
If I have an idea for something, I just want to get something down fast so that I can move on with the process of songwriting.
Well, it will be in a minute.
In Conway Studios.
Here we go.
In this $1,000 a day room. But I was in the waiting room with my laptop and machine and a MIDI controller and started coming up with the beat on machine that would become the song Fortune Tellers.
I'll stop it there, but what was interesting to me about this was, this kind of notion of moving again towards, even though machines obviously got a screen and there's a screen involved, it's like, I'm sick of the IT side of things. I want to just play stuff. That's a given. Lots of people find that very rewarding and a real break from the usual IT side of, music creation, which it can get a little bit data intensive. But the other thought of actually being the starting point. So you've got, the main sessions happening, but there's also like a second room, which is very common in a lot of album recordings or whatever, because quite often, you're working on a song that's finished and there's somebody else working on the idea of another one, and it sort of comes through and there's a kind of workflow, a natural progression to that. And I think that in the video, they go on to say that the engineer takes the stems out of it and then they build on that as a creative tool. I'll come to you first, Ty, because obviously, you are within your specially designed creative environment. Do you have a situation whereby sometimes you think, right, I don't want to do this bit on the computer, I'll turn to a synth or a keyboard and play out some of those thematic ideas or whatever, and then bring it back into your world? Can you work like
quite
that?
Often. Yeah, I do. And also, I've got a traveling system. I love my traveling system. So when I go on holiday or get away, wherever I go, it tends to go wherever I go, to be fair. And it's a system that I can happily work on. And I've got a machine Mark 1 in the traveling system. In the studio, I've got a machine studio in the studio. So I love machine. And then I've got a Mark 1 that goes with me on the traveling system, along with a laptop and a keyboard and lots of hard drives and software and things. But I love going somewhere different and doing it in a different environment. It really does make a difference, even if sometimes, for me, quite often the limitations are a plus point, really, because in here, this is, it's great in here, but the world's my oyster. I can do it absolutely anything I like in here.
Blank page syndrome,
and a lot of the time there's something nice about, I've actually controlled my traveling system, so I don't have every sample library known to man. I just have a limited core, and sometimes it's nice to have that limitation. I used to And in terms of the software, you know, sat in front of a computer, I mean, I came to computer sequences really late, because I didn't really have any interest in being sat in front of a big screen. So I was a big MPC user. So I had a 60. I had an ASQ10 first. Do you remember the ASQ10?
Yeah.
Just the sequence bit. So that was my first sequencer, and then moved on to an MPC 60, and then a 3000, then a
so your kind of sitting in front of hardware is where you started from.
Yeah, and I can honestly say, I think personally the best stuff I ever did was just sat in front of hardware, not looking. I mean, I'm sure you've done this topic so many times before, but there's always a temptation when you play things in to stop and to actually look at what you've played, and that's absolutely rubbish. You just shouldn't do that. You should listen to what it's playing. Does it sound
what it looks like?
You know, the amount of times I see people there going, "Oh, it's just slightly early," and it's, yeah, so what? You know, so you couldn't do that on the screen. Well, you could, but you wouldn't want to do it on one of those little.
Either it fit, yeah, that's great, or it's not. Yeah,
absolutely. Just use your ears, and that was fantastic. And so that's why I came into sequencing on a computer really late. I mean, 97, I think.
Right.
97. I moved onto a computer sequencer, and even then, honestly, that transition from sequencing in the box, you know, in hardware sequencing, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. So no, all of that idea is fine for me. I love it. You know, I do the same. So
it's interesting, isn't it? Where it's almost like we're being sort of re-educated back, because for so long it seemed it was the only way to work, because obviously you've got this huge computing power in front of you and the world's your oyster, and having options, you know, it's at the root of our choice, is at the root of our kind of general, the kind of democratic capitalist society. So it's got to be a good thing, right? But sometimes choice is not a good thing. I mean, we have banged on about that for ages. What about you, Mark? I mean, I know your system is generally compact anyway, but you must have been, you know, back in the days when you were working in the studio with Duran and various other people, did you have a second tier system that you would be kind of tinkering with and then bringing that through?
Yes, almost certainly. I mean, we had the luxury of having various different computers. So I had an Atari Stacey in another room, actually, which was like superb, actually, and then I used to sequence things and just kind of add them in. I'd listen to what was happening in the main room and have ideas and bring things to the table and go, what do you think of this? And it would either go in or it wouldn't, or get used for something else. So, but yeah, so that's not doing it all in the box, I suppose. I mean, the one thing I always wanted to do for my own music was have everything in the box, so that when I come back to something after several years, it's just there. So I like that aspect of working with a computer and being able to have all your mix and everything just come back exactly as it was. But from the creative end of it, something I've noticed more recently is that I think I'm getting into how it feels. I was talking to Gina about this the other day, my wife. I said to her the other day, I remember when I used to record Simon Le Bon's vocals in privacy, Warren's studio house. Simon would sing something and then he would go, how was that? Was it any good? And I'd go entirely on where it hit me in the gut. And if it felt good, I'd go, yeah, that was pretty good. And he'd go, oh, but isn't that little bit there out of tune? And I would be going on the feel of it and how it felt. So when I'm playing, I go on the feel of it and how it, how it felt when I played it. And I don't know. I'm going sort of off on tangents here, but the Line 6 guitar that I've got can make every guitar sound under the sun. But it doesn't come anywhere close to a really good guitar with a really good pickup, because it feels different. And to make it sound different, they've done something to the feel of it, and I'm not sure what that is. So I guess with Machine, if that works for the feel of it, and that creates an environment where you've got the right kind of feel for making music, then maybe that's a good thing.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, it's interesting what you say about the feel, but I've subsequently, that's what I've tried to do. I try and do things based on feel, playing analog synthesizers or any other kind of synthesizer live, into a recorder. But what tends to happen as soon as I start to multi-track, I go, oh, that feels good. But my ability to play it well enough is compromised, so that I think, yeah, that was great, and I listen back and go, oh, that wasn't great at all. There's something I like about it, but now I've got to try and play it a bit better, or I've got the option then to go in and start messing around with it to get it to what I think I had in my head, which I think is where you maybe lose the translation a little bit. But that notion of being able to take this forward, and I think it's just what's interesting to me is the notion of sitting in front of a piece of hardware. I mean, this is becoming more and more a topic as classic sounds are emulated with different interfaces and hardware and software and that side of it. And there's always, yes, but I could just have a plugin that does this. And yes, you're absolutely right. And in many cases, plugins sound fantastic, but it's not the same relationship. But the idea of having this kind of second working system that you could capture that feel that you were talking about and then siphon it into the recording is bound to influence things in a good way, I would hope.
Well, the thing is, the fact that we've got so much hardware kind of implies that must be the way it is. It's having that relationship that makes all the difference. Because as you say, there are 1,000,001 great sounding plugins out there, but how many do I actually use over hardware?
Well, we can see from your backdrop that probably not as many as one would think, but sometimes for convenience sake.
Yeah, no, for convenience, if I'm doing something that I know I need absolute total recall on and I need to do it really quickly, then I have to say, yeah, I'll use something out of the box. But the reality is 9 times out of 10, I will know that it doesn't quite sound as good as, the real thing, or not quite as good as I could have it sounding if I could be bothered to switch some of the gear on and mess with the hardware. But that's a kind of different circumstance, because what I do, I wouldn't say was, I said this last week, it's providing a service. And if I'm going to write music which has real legs and has to be listened to again and again and again and again, then I will always go to the nth degree to make it perfect, in which most of the time that involves hardware for me. Okay. Because even with things like Imposca 2, because I've got the Imposca controller, the touch thing, because that absolutely transforms that instrument. Richard's got one as well, hasn't he?
Yes, Rich
Hilton's got one. Yeah, because that absolutely transforms Imposca 2
into an instrument that you have a relationship with. Yes, I would totally.
Absolutely. It's the relationship thing which it alters. And that kind of proves the point, because you've got a piece of software which is fantastic and sounds fantastic, but once you get used to using it with a proper controller, you would never just go back to, kind of doing it with a mouse.
Absolutely. But I guess the point, there were several interesting things to point this, and that was all cool. So anyway, obviously Machina, I'm not sure if there's anything happened where there's been an OS update. I probably should have read the notes really, but
no, there hasn't.
There hasn't. Okay. Well, you would know, Ty, obviously. Okay. So, but it's just an interesting that there's a lot of focus from manufacturers on workflow as well. If you look at the recent Novation teasers for the starting something, finishing something, they're sort of implying that there's, it's about the creative relationship with artists. So I don't know exactly what's coming along there. All right.
Machine is great though.
Yeah, no, I know.
That has to be said.
I know Gaz uses it as well.
Machine is great.
Right. Let's see. There's another video here. Another sample library from Spitfire Audio. This one's produced by Martin. Where? There we go. I was going to say then. His name escaped me. And this is David Coulter, who's one of these people who just seems to be able to find objects. He's a kind of UK type of. Well, he doesn't make his own instruments necessarily, but he finds things that sound good and play them. He's a saw player. This is the new sample library from Spitfire Audio. It's called, let me see, I've got it here.
Who is a performer.
DC Noisemaker.
Well, not really.
There's an interesting piece here anyway, but this is kind of like a brain dump of David Coulter's kind of creative sensibilities with these odd sounds and what have you. And I think this, again, it's getting onto the aspect of how he approaches playing with instruments and the sort of sounds he can make. There was a similar sort of thing, wasn't there, with the the Gamelan contact library that came out. I think this is a contact-based library as well. that allows you to kind of just take the dump of all of these people's kind of creative input in terms of unusual instruments and then utilize them with, great programming and what have you. I know, Mark, do you... It reminds me a little bit of one of those there used to be percussionists floating about who would turn up with all sorts of odd things that they would then play, and at the drop of a hat, can we have that on the track, rather than just rather than a shaker, it will be something made of seashells from the South Pacific. There's that sort of different aspect, isn't there?
I like all those things. All of those things, anything weird that makes a noise. If you look on YouTube, there's a video of me cutting motorcycle spokes with an angle grinder, and if you buy Isotopes Iris, that sample is in the sample library, I think. So I mean, anything that does something complete that makes a sound that you haven't heard before has got to be good. I'm a bit worried about Martin Ware, though, because he's sitting there in a cardigan and he looks like he should be in a Hovis ad or something. And I'm thinking, my God, he looks like my granddad. And then what's really worrying about that is I'm only a couple of years behind him. So does that mean I look like my granddad?
Quite possibly.
So,
he's great.
Not look in the mirror now.
If you haven't had the chance, I interviewed Martin Ware. Heaven 17 played.
Oh, he's very clever.
Played in Bristol, and we did an interview, and he was really generous with his time. And then he comes across as he comes, and then during the gig, he was singing these ridiculously high backing vocals all the time. But the one thing I remember particularly, there was a keyboard player called Bernice who was involved. And I was talking to him and he was keen for her to have a say in it. And I just remember him saying, "Come into the light, Bernice." And it just sounded like such an old thing to say. It was particularly... it's always stuck with me, and I have no reason to know why. Ty, are you always on the lookout for, because obviously famously film composers, music to picture composers are kind of at the whims of what is currently available in Contact and what have you. Do you fall into that sort of thing, or do you approach things differently?
No, I fall very much into that camp. I mean, people that know me know that. I mean, I'd probably buy at least one sample library every day of some sort, which is absolutely ridiculous, but it's kind of a fact, and it's really, it's really stupid. But it may literally be a small. I like lots of small independent sample producers, because they, a bit like this library, they've kind of got nothing to lose, so they kind of go out on a limb. Really, they almost sit there and go, "What isn't saturating the world at the moment in terms of sample library, and we'll do that."
Right.
And so they'll just take some small little instrument that no one's ever heard of, and they'll go, "Well, I'll do a smallish library for this, and I'll charge £5 for it or something."
Right.
And they're fantastic. There's a site called Sampleism, and Sampleism is amazing, because you just sit there, and I've sent so many friends and colleagues down this route, and you'll suddenly find a whole world.
Snacks for your samplers, waveforms for your woofers. What an awesome tagline! Yeah, so they're all these little. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, you have to sort through them. I'm not saying there's some rubbish in there, but there's some that are less appealing than others. But there are some amazing sounds, some amazing libraries in there, and they cost next to nothing, and they're fantastic. But I'm friends with the Spitfire guys that have done this library, and that's kind of what I like about Spitfire, because Spitfire they kind of have two sides to them, which is the big orchestral libraries that we all kind of know them for, and then they have a kind of a smaller, weirder, they do the artisan sections and producer sections, and they just do the things that other people don't do, which is, that's my world.
Yeah, you can only have so many. How big can a big drum get to accent every cut? I mean, that's the thing that I always find funny now. There's this, it's an easy trap to fall into. It's like, I can't think of anything, so what I'll do is just go on every cut to dramatise it, and it's not appropriate in many cases. But it's the curse of the taiko drum, isn't it?
a lot of the time, that's out of our hands. A lot of the time, doing what we do in TV, you kind of have to do what director, producer, what they want. And so many times you sit there going, "Do you know what? This is just the easy way out to open up Storm Drum 3 and double it up with hand hammer percussion and do a big, But you kind of have to, so many times you have to sit there going, they're paying the bill, and you do that big drum even though you really don't want to. There are a million and one other ways you could have the same effect, but people want mini Hans Zimmers.
Well, maybe with the Spitfire thing is quite interesting, is because he's got those tiny little Japanese or Chinese fans, which have silk stretched up, and he hits those with the top of a pencil with an eraser on the top, and that becomes a massive drum. I don't know. Yeah. So that subverting that way.
I've got a question about this actually. I mean, Martin Ware is really big on 3D audio as well. I have a friend, a mutual friend actually, who said that we should meet up at some point, and had said that Martin has this room with all these speakers in it, and he can make the sound fly around this sound stage. But he, okay. So the question that I'm trying to get round to, in my rambling kind of Tinley way, is has he put any binaural or 3D recordings in that library?
I don't think so, because I think it's using standard. It's using the standard Spitfire mic settings, so I don't think so is the answer. I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
Right. Okay. Well, Spitfire do a lot of unusual things. One thing, like, what's the other one? It's like a storm of bees, or I remember they've got some really interesting sound libraries. Swarm. That's right.
Mandolins.
Swarm mandolins. Yeah. Well, there you go.
That's fantastic. I've used that.
A swarm of mandolins or bees?
Mandolins.
No, mandolins. It's just a load of mandolins, tremolo mandolins. And,
I've got microphones in my beehive at the moment. Right, but they're not doing anything particularly interesting, unfortunately.
Getting fairly sticky, I'd imagine.
We've just got the title.
I mean, they do smell a bit weird.
Here it comes. Are they stick mics? Haha, thank you very much.
No. But there's one hell of a sting.
Hey. Right, well, anyway, if you want to check that out, that's the latest Spitfire release. We've got time for something else here. Oh, yeah, video 4. Let's try this guy. So this is Rob Parpen's RPEQ, which is a sort of dynamic, again, MidSide EQ, which is a really interesting thing. I know MidSide has been used quite a lot in terms of compression, and it can do some brilliant things to the focus of a mix and the way that you'll perceive it.
Let me introduce you to RPEQ. As you might notice by looking at this video about RPEQ, is that it has an uncommon feature compared to other EQs.
So you can modulate the frequencies.
It has the XY pad, which you also can find inside our synthesizers, Blade, Bluetooth and Raw.
I won't play the whole thing, but as we know, EQs are a never-ending. I mean, because EQs essentially are quite a sort of dull bread and butter type of thing, and obviously, it's nice to find one that you can really recognise. I think it's a bit like finding a pair of monitors where you just know, it's going to do what you need to do. I don't know, Ty, are you? I know you use Nuendo. But this notion of kind of dynamic EQs and modulating EQs and the mid-side thing, are you finding you use that kind of stuff, or is that not quite so required in your particular...
No, personally, the mid-side stuff, not so much. I've got lots of, from Plugin Alliance, I got all the BX stuff, and I'm a big UAD user, and I think they've got quite a few mid-side stuff. But I don't really use it. To be fair, if I'm completely honest with you, I'm not sure I completely understand the entire principle of the whole mid-side things, because I think it sounds great, and then I come to try and use it thinking, hang on a second. I think the way it uses mid-side on here is quite obvious, the way it works. Essentially, it's a kind of very simplified version of it, and I think it sounds really creative. I think it's great. I think it looks a really nice piece of software. I mean, I like his stuff anyway. And
well, because Rob Parpen has a room almost as full of synthesizers as you do. I think you probably, if you had,
more than I've got.
He's got your beat, has he?
Yeah, absolutely, and so he should have. No, but he's. I kind of use his software quite a lot, and even the smaller stuff like his delays and his delay I use quite a lot. And it's difficult to get excited about EQ, but I think if you're going to get excited about EQ, you go one of two ways, which is either the way that UAD views EQ, in other words, try and do a direct replica of a
classic,
a vintage piece of EQ and try and do that route, or you go the completely creative side of things, which this has done. And I think I think there's a lot you could do with this, with the whole, with the mid-side thing, kind of, and also, I mean, I watched it through. If you watch the way it's done, it's so easy to do. It looks incredibly simple. So, and I've actually, because I've got their, whatever it is Explorer 3 or whatever their package is. So I think I can just download it. I don't think you need to pay for it if you've got the Explorer package.
I think that's right. It's part of that, or you can buy it for. It says here, €79, $89. So you can get that. I know, Mark. I don't know whether you have a kind of favourite EQ. I'm sure we might have covered this before. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I'm a bit tired.
Probably. I mean, my favourite EQ is any of the Match EQ plugins, and I've got 3 different ones, I think.
Oh, you go for the match side of things, right? That's right.
So I love the idea of like, oh, I quite like the sound of that. I'll just nick that sonic fingerprint and put it on something else, and that tends to work quite well if you're in a hurry. So I did a voiceover for something, and I went on iTunes and I listened to a whole load of podcasts till I found one with somebody with a similar speaking voice to mine who'd got a great mic sound. And I just fingerprinted it, and suddenly I sounded exactly like this podcast. Took about 10 minutes to do that, rather than sitting there tweaking and going, oh, I need to do this, and I need to do that, and I need to do the other. It's like, find a sound you like, and then it's like sampling, I suppose. But then again, having said that, when I get creative, I like playing around with powerful EQs, with really sharp and really kind of violent Q factors and stuff. I always there was one of the SSL mixing desks which I always said was being a guitarist, for me it was just like having loads of wah-wahs. It's like, oh yeah, this is good, filter suite.
I think there's a couple of good ones in the chat room. Valhalla, Fab Filter, another Dutch clubbing, PSP Master is pretty good as well. So there's a lot of tips. I remember actually, Mark, you were oh god, I forgot what I was going to. So the matching EQ, I'm curious actually, when you kind of get that sound and you match it, are the settings in the are they more or less extreme than you would anticipate when you look at the curves?
There's more factors, I think.
Right.
So the curve, instead of just being like a bell curve on a simple EQ, it's like there's lots of that going on and they all overlap. So it's like a spline EQ, I suppose. So it would be like, I don't know if you've ever seen the kind of EQ curve you get when you test a microphone and you do it really accurately and you get lots of little spikes at all the different places. Or if you EQ your room, you'll come back with like all the standing waves in the room will throw up like a peak or a trough, depending on where the reflections are. It kind of looks like that. It's like a wiggly line. So you need lots and lots of EQ, different EQs to create that kind of effect with lots of peaks and troughs. So I think, I mean, one of the ones I've got is the thing called Voxengo EQ, which is quite good. And it has like a spline thing for matching EQ, so you can load a track into it, and then you can load the track you're working on into another slot, and then you can.
Did you say it was curve EQ?
Those
curve EQ.
Curve EQ, yeah.
There it
so
is.
You can literally load 2 different sources of audio into it, get it to like do a sonic fingerprint of one, and then apply it to the other, and then spit it back out again, or use it as an EQ.
Ah, that looks interesting. I think I've just used the Vox and Go Span, which is just a sort of FFT type thing, just to show the harmonics in the waveform that I was doing with the Modot NF1 review coming soon, by the way.
I mean, it's like, it would be like having 60 EQs in a line, I suppose, or like having
like a variable
graphic EQ with 60 bands, very tight bands. And
they used to, there used to be one on the. There used to be it was called a simulator on the PowerCore system.
That
did the same
PowerCore.
That did the same thing, and I used to use it quite a lot for mastering, because you used to basically get the EQ sound of one track and
apply it to the other, right?
Apply it to the other. It used to work well, actually.
But you can do it with, just like if there's, I don't know, say you've got a Led Zeppelin track and the guitar's on its own at the beginning of the track or in the middle even, and you want to get that exact guitar sound, you just set up a pretty crunchy distortion somewhere similar to what you think the record's doing, and then you just take the EQ from the Led Zeppelin record, put it on your guitar, and it sounds exactly like it. You can do it. You can do it with pretty much anything. I mean, you can make one synth sound like another synth, or you can make any microphone that you're recording with sound like another one. You just need to basically create what's a sample of one thing and a sample of the other thing, and then get it to apply one EQ curve to the other, or the other way around.
Yeah, so, it's not. It doesn't quite work. Yes, I mean I've got. It sort of works, but it's the same as Mark was saying about the EQ on standing waves and things when you do analysis of rooms, because I did because I had, like everyone else had, the what was it, the IKE
Arc.
multimedia one? What's it called? Arc 2. That's
I've got one
so
of
I
those
tried Arc 2.
here. This
and
thing.
Arc 2, yeah, that's the one. And Arc 2 worked really well, and then I bought have you heard of Trinov, the Trinov system?
No.
No.
Do you know this? This is it's what's the best way of describing it? It's essentially, it corrects a room corrector, and I thought initially that this was going to be the same as Arc 2, but it takes it into a whole new world. And
oh really?
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, I was going to talk to Nick about kind of this as a subject for another time, but
well, you can save it. That's all right. That's no problem, because
that might be interesting, because I'm using Arc. Gaz is using Ergo, the KRK thing, and if you're using that, then maybe that
Trinov,
would be
absolutely
a good discussion.
Absolutely. But I mean, the Trinov system it's a separate PC essentially.
Right. So it's doing a lot of real time crunching then.
A lot of it's amazing though. It can the room here was great. It was good, and Arc it had a few problems, but you plug this system in and the kind of switching it in, switching it out, it's just like night and day. It's amazing.
Phase response.
Absolutely.
Oh really?
Oh right. Yeah. Okay. Well, we will.
I'm going to go back to Rob Pappin's EQ.
Yes, which you could. It's an 8-band EQ actually.
A long time ago, before digital synths and digital mixers became prevalent, and we had super quiet digital mixers or super quiet digital EQs in our computers, I tried lots of different mixers and came to the conclusion that my quietest way of mixing was to use at home was to use a Roland line mixer, which had no EQ on it at all. And then I basically plugged in all of my synths, and I had to get my synth sounds absolutely right and create whatever EQ curves I needed to create with the filters. So I might have this slightly wrong, but I'm getting a sense that this is a synthesizer EQ as a plugin. So does that mean that I can basically use synthesizer functionality on my recorded tracks in my digital audio workstation?
I guess it depends on the characteristics of the filters, what the cues are like, and whether you've got those kind of things. So yes, I mean, EQ filters are essentially low pass, high pass filters, band pass. They're all of those things really. It's just they're in synthesizers, they're more extreme, I believe, if I understand that correctly. I'm not sure.
So I like extreme EQs. So if it's an extreme EQ, I ought to try it out.
Yeah, well, that sounds like you should. Definitely.
Yeah. I think it is. It's a cross between a synth filter and a EQ. Yeah. It looks great. It looks really creative, which is never a bad thing.
Okay, well, that's
also if it's dynamic EQ, one of the things I have problems with is if I use a really extreme EQ and then I dump it in the middle of a track, it just swamps everything sometimes. And if it can be made to dynamically respond to the track and not just take over with whatever weird sound I've made, that would be of interest to me as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. Right, I think I'm going to chop it there because I've got a lot of things to sort out this evening. So I know there are a couple of topics remaining, so I do apologise if you were gagging to talk about them. Perhaps they can live for another day. But I want to say thank you very much.
I didn't want to talk about it.
No, okay, that's fine. Well, we'll stop it there and leave everybody guessing. So, yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Thank you very much to the chat room. It's great to have a good crowd in there, as ever. Gosh, it's going up again. We must be wonder if that means our listener numbers are going up. I do hope so. Don't forget, subscribe if you're first in the chat room. Have I plugged the YouTube channel enough? I think I probably have. But before we go, I'll just say quickly again, thank you very much to iZotope for sponsoring the show. Remember, if you want to win iZotope Brake Tweaker, tweet the hashtag synthbeats, one word, and the hashtag brake tweaker, one word, to @SonicState and @iZotope Inc. And do feel free to check out the plugin, iZotope.com/brake tweaker, and it's on sale until the end of today for $100 off. So do check that out. So anyway, that's all of that housekeeping done. So we'll say goodbye to Ty Unwin, whose probably mind is wandering to that impending deadline. And
back to it.
Thank you very much for joining us. Much appreciated. And as ever.
Fun, thank you.
Thank you. So thanks for joining us, and also to Mr. Mark Tinley, Matt, the newlywed guy. I hope that you have a great week too, and keep doing the washing up and all of those things that you now probably have had written into your marriage contract.
I'm going to go and make some sausages now. Yeah.
Okay, I will.
Actually,
we could leave that as some kind of slightly rude pause there. But...
Okay, fair enough.
Sorry, carry on. I just wanted to let that drop for a minute. You wanted to add something there, Mark. Did you have something else to say? Sorry.
I was going to say, if you follow me on Twitter, you might find some of the wedding pictures on there, and they're all very nice.
Ah, brilliant. Well, anyway, thank you very much, and thanks to all our guests, and thank you to the chat room and all of those things. That's it for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I will now fade to black. I think that's the button I press. Yes, there it goes. Bye-bye.